Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias. Thought I'd break out the medium Rough Ryder toothpicks today. As far as I know, this is all of them that you're going to find. There's only 5 Rough Ryder medium toothpicks. I also will show you 2 medium toothpicks in the Colt lineup. There might be a couple other Colt medium toothpicks, but I have yet to see them. At the time, I was mainly collecting Rough Riders, so the Colts were kind of flying under the radar. Okay, with that said, let's get started. The very first Rough Ryder medium toothpick that was made is right here. This is the one in the amber jig bone. I've also seen it listed as brown jig bone, but normally people refer to it as the amber jig. This one has a later shield on it. This is not the first shield that was used. So these knives were made on at least 2 or 3 times. So there's at least 2 or 3 runs of this knife. As far as I know, the first run of them did not have the pattern number on the back. This one does, as you see here. This is the RR451. And you notice it also has the bomb shield on that. You'll also notice that there is no half stop on this knife. This is an early one, no swedges or anything else. You also notice they have a single ring bolster on the back and single ring bolster on the top. So the powder horn is just a single ring powder horn. Typically, the Rough Ryder large toothpicks will have a triple ring on the bolster. At least on the powder horn. Sometimes the top bolster will be different. Notice the High Plains has the big R on there, which a lot of the small toothpicks will also have. But you see here, these are the large toothpicks. They have a triple ring powder horn, and the same thing happens with the small toothpicks. Most of them will have a triple ring powder horn, but the earlier Rough Ryder toothpicks have a single ring on the powder horn. Of course, then they go with the, when you get to the last one they made, it was also a triple ring on the powder horn, and that was a carryover from the Colt lineup. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is typically on eBay, these will also be listed as a large toothpick. So, because they're not a small toothpick. They're not a medium or the small, tiny 3-inch toothpicks. These are 4 1/8 inches long, but they're truly more of a medium toothpick. Case even lists these as a medium toothpick. They have since gotten rid of their large toothpicks, but they still continue to list these as a medium toothpick. Now, some fool on Cutlery Corner Network claim that this is the standard toothpick, the 3-inch toothpick. That's not at all true. These are basically pocket candy. They're the tiny toothpicks. This is not where the pattern started. The pattern actually started in the larger range, the 5-inch toothpicks, and then they made it a little more pocket friendly in the medium toothpicks, which are the 4-inch toothpicks. And then later on, they made the tiny jewelry ones, which are more cosmetic, but they do serve a function and they do work, and they actually can cut stuff. Just wanted to show you the differences in sizes and also a little bit of a difference of the appearance that these knives will have when you see them on eBay. Because as you can tell here, well, large, medium, small, or tiny, or baby. So you can see the difference in size. These are about 4 1/8 inches long. So that's the size comparison, and some things to look at when you're trying to find them on eBay, because, well, they're all out of production except maybe this one. Okay, with the general size comparisons and also the cosmetic comparisons done, let's move on to the other patterns. This is the red smooth bone. This is the RR452. And you'll notice that it is a little bit earlier because this one has the what's known as the propeller shield, the Rough Ryder propeller shield. Got the little rider in the middle with the Rough Ryder in the eye showing up. Again, single ringed powder horn, single ring top bolster, and this one has the etch on there, tested RR sharp, and the Rough Ryder signature. And if you notice here, it says 440 razor sharp in China, but there is no pattern number on there because this is a newer or a later one, or an earlier one rather. So this was the 451 in the bomb shield. You will also find 451s in the propeller shield, and you will also find them in the round shield, which we'll move on to next, which is the RR 453 in the green smooth bone. Notice horseshoe shield now. You still have the RR tested sharp on the blade and the Rough Ryder signature, and again just China, and the 440 razor sharps. So those are the blade markings on the earlier ones. And like I said, if you notice on this one, this is the 451, but it's later. Now you have the horseshoe tang versus the signature tang, and you do have the signature on there. I believe this one made it as far as the bomb shield. The red and the green, I believe you will only find with the round horseshoe shield or the propeller shield. You will not find these in the bomb shield. I believe this is the only one that managed to make it to the bomb shield. These were only made, I believe, on 2 separate runs. And after that, it was done. Now, before I move on to the last 2 Rough Ryder toothpicks, I want to talk about these 2 knives from Colt, and it'll all make sense in just a second. If you're familiar with the Rough Ryder buckshot bone lineup, you've probably seen a knife that looks very similar to this, and that's because the Rough Ryder buckshot bone was pulled over from the old Colt lineup of knives that SMKW was also producing. And that's where it basically began. The buckshot bone was first in the Colt lineup and then moved over into the Rough Ryder lineup sometime later. And so basically this knife was made pre-2016, which is when Colt stopped making knives, or when SMKW stopped making knives for Colt. And you see here, this is buckshot bone. It's got the red underliner, and you see the 3 rings on the bolster here, which is what was happening with the Colt medium toothpicks. I wasn't collecting them at the time. I picked this one up shortly after Colt went belly up in 2017. And you see here, you got the reverse frosted edge on there, keeping the piece since 1836, and you have the Colt tang stamp there. And this one, as you can tell, does not have a half stop, but it does have the swedge, and that's because this is one of the earlier Colt medium toothpicks. The buckshot bone was not pulled over right away. Can I get that to show? It's the Colt 687, I think. No, yeah, 686. This was the 686 in the buckshot bone. And made around the same time is another knife that will look very familiar to you if you collect some of the Rough Ryders, and that is the turquoise peak. And notice you've got the turquoise, or the imitation turquoise, and then the black acrylic material in there. I don't believe it's bone. I believe it's just a black acrylic. And then you have, once again, the etch on there. In this case, it's quality since 1836, with the little pony jumping up and down, or the Colt jumping up and down. And you see the Colt tang stamp, and obviously the Colt C on there. That's the Anaconda C, which is the first letter in Colt. Notice that? And they used basically the shape of the snake for the C, and that's that one I was all right with, even though I sometimes refer to it as a skewered worm. You see the little tongue even there, or is it just a neck? In any case, you see that on both of these. And that's why the big R shows up on the Rough Ryder knives, because they decided to go take... These were considered a slightly better version of a Rough Ryder. They're supposed to have a better finish and everything else, and that's why they did things like pinch the bolsters and put more bling on the bolsters, which a lot of people ended up not liking when it became the big R. I think the Anaconda C was a little better received, simply because that was very much a symbol for Colt. And interesting here is this one does not have a half stop, and this one also does not have a half stop. So at the time, Colt was not using half stops on some of their knives, but they were also using it on some of their knives. It was kind of either or with them. In any case, those were the two Colt medium toothpicks I'm aware of. There might be other ones out there. I'm still looking. But now that brings us to the Black Widow, which looks very reminiscent of the Colt knives, especially the turquoise peak. The difference, though, is you notice instead of having 3 rings on the powder horn, they've only put 1 ring on the powder horn, and they've changed out the Anaconda C for the big R, or the Robert Townsend. At least the T part on there is really just a line at the very bottom of the bolster, so it's really out of the way. But you notice it does have the crimping going on there, and you can see the chevrons for the red. I think that would be Bloody Basin Jasper, is what it's supposed to be. And otherwise, you got the black acrylic, and you got the Black Widow right there. And this knife was actually supposed to come out in the Colt run, but, well, things happened. Colt went away, and so they moved this one over to the Rough Ryder lineup. So it had the Colt licensing agreement with SMKW had remained in place. This would have been a Colt knife instead of a Rough Ryder knife. In any case, now you actually have a half stop. So it was right around the time when Colt was going away that Colt was starting to put half stops on everything. And this knife, which is the 1672 Black Widow, came out, or would have been coming out, about the same time as the Peak. The Peak would later show up in the Rough Ryder lineup too. But what you have here is a nice little half stop going on, and you've got the Black Widow blade etch going on there too. And you see now 440 razor sharp, and the Rough Ryder horseshoe shield still with the I, because these knives have the Rough Ryder I, not Rough Ryder Y. But pretty well made, and kind of a nice bling going on with it. And then finally, the last one here is the Classic Carbon series, and as you can tell, it's following the same path that the Colt knives were. So my theory is the Rough Ryder Classic Carbon knives that you're seeing were actually planned for the Colt line of knives, but ended up getting moved into the Rough Ryder line of knives when the licensing agreement with Colt disappeared. And this one is with the yellow Delrin, or yellow composition. It's not truly Delrin. You've got T10 carbon steel in there, which is a Chinese equivalent to 1095 carbon steel in the United States. You got the brass liners and the half stop. And there you go. In any case, one of the biggest complaints that people make about these knives, well, first of all, now you know all the knives that were in the Rough Ryder lineup. Amber jig bone, 451. 452 is the red smooth bone. 453 is the green smooth bone. 1672 was the Black Widow. These are still somewhat available in some places, but getting harder to find. And finally, the 1744, which is the classic carbon, the first classic carbons. Those are not as, they're no longer in production, but they're still readily available. And these two were the Colts, the 686 in the buckshot bone and the 687 in the turquoise peak. It would be nice if Rough Ryder would go ahead and re-release these two knives in the popular buckshot bone series now by Rough Ryder, and also in their turquoise peak series, which is now in Rough Ryder 2. But I doubt that they're going to do that. Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with the Pious. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.